God, as we go back to school tomorrow. Not tomorrow, excuse me, Tuesday.
Now, she fell and hit her head. That was not a response to my coming up for the...
All right, happy Labor Day weekend. I am one of those who could respond pretty readily to the question just asked in Dad's corner. You know, what do you need help trusting God for, trusting God with? We are in the midst of a move at Missio Seminary. I am in a field, the field of education, which is accurately described as more of a seasonal ministry anyway. The summer is more prep time. It's not summers off, right, Kwang? It's not that we have summers off. Teachers often get accused of that. Oh, man, you get 3 whole months off or 2 whole months. No, it's prep time. But it's much more intense from September to May for sure. And we, as I've chatted about with you a little bit already here in Plymouth meeting, CLC, or in the midst of a move, we had our student orientation last week. So I got to get a firsthand look at what my new commute to work looks like. Some of you may ask, I know my wife's here today, I know she's asking, how in the world did you take pictures while you're... Traffic was moving about 3 miles an hour at that point. That's the infamous Schuylkill Expressway. And I will tell you that some of the old anxieties and questions and sense of stress began to arise as I realized this is now my new commute. But then traffic did start to move a little bit. Here's my new view as I come into work. I wish I'd gotten a shot of the Art Museum. That's my favorite building in Philadelphia, but traffic was actually moving too fast at that point. And it's actually one of my colleagues at Missio that helped plant this thought and give me more of this vision. He says, you know, the space in the city is smaller. I mean, there's no getting around. 10,000 square feet, which is where we're going, is smaller than 50,000 square feet, which is where we're coming from. There's no getting around, at least for the time being. My spacious office that I've enjoyed for 20 years is going to be a shared office space with 3 other faculty colleagues. Now, I love and appreciate my faculty colleagues, don't get me wrong. I'm not particularly excited about sharing office space with 3 of them. I'm just saying. There's no getting around that. I mean, there are some adjustments that I frankly am still warming to. But I got to say, like my colleague, kind of put in my head that came back to me as I'm driving to Philadelphia. When I enter the city limits and see that skyline, I just get a little rush of excitement. And I'm going to say, if I'm really honest with you, I felt that for the first time going into student orientation this past week. It's not that I've been opposed to the move or anything like that. I get the vision, I get the strategic plan and whatnot. But that's a major global city. That just feels a bit more significant than Hatfield, Pennsylvania. Now, Hatfield, Pennsylvania, that's important too. They need the Lord too. But that's downright exciting. Here's my new view from my new office window. Now, that'll give you a bit of a rush of excitement too. Now, that's not the only picture I've got. If I go to the left and blow it up a little bit, and I am going to blow it up a little bit, you see what that is there? That's the 8th Street underpass at Vine Street. That's 8th and Vine. And it's hard to see. It's hard to see on the. If I showed it to you on my phone up close, it'd be hard to see. It's dark. That's the homeless cluster there. I can also see that from my office window. At the very least, a stark reminder of just how broken our world is. You know, there's a side of me. I'm a lifelong small towner suburbanite, that I can be nervous about that. I can be apprehensive about that. But we are a missional school. We're named Missio Seminary after all. These are our folks that are clear examples of people that need the Lord. And just what kind of broken world we're called to by the grace of God, by the power of the Spirit of God, to begin to mend and restore and introduce to the Lord, whom, of course, they and we badly need. Now, this is the reason why we moved into the city. Not the food. Ignore that. For the first time in recent memory, we have 4 classes kicking off here day after tomorrow of 30-plus students. My class is one of them. Not only do I have 35 students in the class I begin Tuesday night, but it's roughly broken down just about evenly. 33% African American, 33% Asian and or Asian American, 33% Caucasian, 20% female. I mean, when the ATS accreditors come, they're going to flip over the level of diversity, that we have in our classrooms. I mean, so, like I said all along, this is a bold, courageous plan, that's for a reason. Like I said all along, this is what we need to do. No, you know better than that. I'm one that's been for it, but had apprehensions. But yeah, got a really nice glimpse from the Lord last week of just why we're doing this. And if that weren't enough, I got one more picture. Now that is my son, Seth. I'm sorry. Now, I knew that Seth was contemplating coming back for his doctor of ministry degree, but he did. He surprised me last week. He is one of the ones in the entering class in the city. He's starting his doctor of ministry this fall. And so in that new bumper crop of students is my own son. So it's Labor Day weekend. I'm about to launch into, and maybe you are too, I don't know how seasonal is your ministry, is your line of work. But day after tomorrow, I'm beginning a new school year, and in some ways a whole new chapter of my life and career. So I thought it would be a good idea take a little break from Moses' Exodus and the transition through the plagues and Passover into the Promised Land, to take a step back and think about this Labor Day weekend. Why exactly we do what we do, Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday. Whatever it is you do, whatever field of work you are in, why do you do what you do, and does it matter? So some Labor Day weekend reflections, doing, I guess, what theologians do, a biblical theological examination of the meaning and meaningfulness of work. In short, does our work matter? Does what we do matter? Vern Poitras and John Frame, both renowned Reformed theologians, have observed. They both have written book-length treatises that in part take up this point. It's the field of epistemology. I mean, it's deep, academic, some of it kind of arcane work. But one of their points is epistemologically. That's a great 50-cent word. But where we differ, where we human beings differ from the animals, is the animals just do what they do. You know, they're hungry, so they do what they do. There's activity. I mean, it's great that birds fly. It's great that horses run. You know, but they just do what they do, just kind of following their instinct. Part of what reflects the image of God in human beings is the capability to engage to some degree in transcendence. Now, transcendence, that's a term that's normally reserved for God alone. And only God is fully transcendent. That is, only God is fully above and outside of His creation completely. We are always locked by our finitude and fallibility into warped perspectives. But we share this quality with God by His creative design of being able to do more than just do. We can actually step back, and that's called, in fact, you can hear it, we can transcend. That is, we don't just do what we do, but we can step back and reflect on, what is it that I am doing exactly? Why am I doing what I am doing? That quality animals can't do. That's something that only human beings created in the image of God can do. And that's what we're going to do this morning, guided by God's inspired Word. All right, we'll start from the beginning. Genesis 2. Now, already in Genesis 1 and 2, there has been creative design. You know, we start out with the earth formless and void. But right away, when God initiates creative activity, there's organization, logical progression, separation and distinction, light from darkness, water from land, vegetation and its varieties. And then you get into the actual created beings, birds and land animals, culminating, of course, in the creation of human beings. Human beings are created to be God's co-regent, to be God's agent. Co-regent means co-reigner, reigning on God's behalf, administrating on God's behalf. There's already been organization, but then He creates human beings to field the rest of the details, as it were. So in Genesis 2:15, we're told that God has created this fertile, teeming with life creation, particularly in this garden. And then Genesis 2:15 tells us, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden. Now, I'm afraid many people, even many Christians, if you weren't looking at the verse, if you weren't actually reading the verse, would be tempted to think, what comes next? God put the human being into the garden to relax in it. To kick back and relax in it. But that's not what he says. He put the man in the garden to work it and care for it. The Hebrew words there are abad. That's just the regular word for work. To work it. Now, and then shamar, well, to keep it up. Overtones of to protect it. And we know they didn't do very well. You got that snake that comes in, looks like comes in pretty much right away. But he puts the human beings, Eve is about to be created by the end of this chapter, but puts the human beings in the garden to work it. The major point being, we were created, we were designed to work. By Genesis 3, there's a terrible curse that comes on the creation and human beings because of rebellion against God and sin. But work is not the curse. Work is part of our creative design. By Genesis 3, I'm going to pick up at, I'm just going to zero in on verse 18. The garden, which already up to now has been teeming with life, it still is. It's fertile soil. You can grow stuff in it. But now it's going to produce not just corn and soybeans and roses and daisies and food and tomatoes. It's also now going to produce thorns and thistles. And the work, which we were designed to do, we had muscles to be able to till the ground even before. But now, the ground to some degree works against you. The ground no longer cooperates. That's the curse, not the work itself. What was it like before the thorns and thistles? I don't know. I meant to click this earlier. See, there's the flaw. There's the fall right there. I meant to click that already. It's the thorns and thistles that are new after the fall. What would have been like before the fall? I don't know. You saw the rabbits there and whatnot. Well, some organization, these rabbits are going to, breed like rabbits. They're going to eat carrots. Let's put a section of carrots over there for them to eat. We'll save the people food. You can see there would have been organization needed even before the fall. Work. Tilling the ground. I assume that there would be different soil textures even before the fall. But now you've got some of the same work and the same goals. They may be righteous goals. They may be designed by God goals. But now the whole thing is infected with uncooperativeness, hostility, discomfort, rebellion, and even sin. The point being, your work is not the curse. It's easy to be distracted by the thorns and thistles. It's easy to be frustrated by the thorns and thistles, and to a degree, rightly so. But it's the thorns and thistles that are the curse, not the work itself. And now, unfortunately, all of creation and whatever we do is infected with the thorns and thistles. So the thorns and thistles and the majestic genius of how God inspired His Word, there's thorns and thistles, but that's emblematic. And even the literary device here could be described as synecdoche. That's a microcosm of the whole problem. Now, you know the problem. You know the problem well. It means now even good things that we're up to have frustration and stuff that doesn't work. Now, even when you're doing something as pleasant and wonderful and righteous as playing the violin, but gee, now the string breaks. There's a frustration. It's even worse than that. Think of the most righteous activity you can think of. maybe being part of a church community. This is the focus. God's covenantal people. You manifest worshiping in the Spirit of God, but now there's thorns and thistles. And so there could be the frustration of even sinful activity and harm done. That doesn't mean, the church is just like the rest of the world. No. The church is still a righteous and good, Spirit-empowered and Spirit-prompted work of God, but it too has the occasional thorn or thistle. I was trying to think of what's the most righteous, godly activity that I do on any kind of regular basis, and I thought of this. I know there's at least one person in the room who will appreciate this as an illustration. I can be fully in the midst of, anointed by the Holy Spirit of God, working on a sermon for Christ Life Church. Now, this didn't happen this week. I'm not talking about something that happened this morning. Not that it couldn't, but I'm just saying, by way of illustration, this is the kind of thing that has happened and could have. I can be working on studying the Word of God in preparation for a Spirit-anointed sermon for a group of holy, righteous people like Christ Life Church in Plymouth Meeting. And I'm in the midst of deep concentration, prayerfully contemplating how the Spirit of God would have this particular point broached. When I get a call from the other room, Toddy, can you come get this bowl off the top shelf? I'm trying to work on a sermon here. You hear that? Can you relate to that at all? I'm trying to work on how to be kind and gentle with other people. I'm trying to preach on how to be patient. And it's not that the sermon preparation is part of the curse. And then I'm just a rank hypocrite, although that's a problem too. But even the most righteous activities that we engage in are now infected with thorns and thistles and impacted in subtle and not so subtle ways with the fall and elements of sin and sinfulness. But we were designed to work. That actually is part of what God has designed us that glorifies Him when we do it. Recognizing the thorns and thistles and the sinfulness and all that, but the work itself is what God designed us to do. Now also notice, we were not designed just to work. Now, it's not until Exodus 20, which I know is post-fall, that we get this stated explicitly, although we've got some big hints even before then. The manna only fell 6 days out of 7. God worked only 6 days out of 7. Even God rested on the seventh day. So we've got patterns and implicit insinuation of a Sabbath pattern and Sabbath rhythm even before Exodus 20. But Exodus 20 makes clear we were designed to work. 6 days you shall do your labor. But we were not designed just to work. Now, I want to say this particularly to the Americans in the room. I want to say this particularly to the Koreans in the room. And I want to say this particularly to the Korean Americans in the room. Why those categories? Because those three sets of people, and some of you are all three, have this same capitalistic tendency in which we can think workaholism is a virtue. See, capitalism says if the competitor is working 24/7, you need to work 24/7. See, capitalism says, and I love the free market system and the benefits and whatnot, And I know Korea was a mess before capitalism and free market economy came. I'm not saying, we should do something other than free market capitalism, but I'm saying it has this downside. Free market capitalism says use every inch of space, every second of time for productivity, because that increases the profit margin, and profit is God. That's not Christianity. That's idolatry. So can I say as clearly as I can, as gently as I can, but as clearly as I can? Workaholism is vice, not virtue. I spent some time in South Korea a year and a half ago with a man some of you know. I was doing teaching work there, but my traveling companion and the person who had facilitated the trip actually was a man named Tim Haas. Some of you may know him. And I spent most nights with Tim and Janice Haas. And it was my first time to Korea. And so I'm just wide-eyed at what I'm seeing. And I'm telling you, what I notice are things that are different from America. One of the things that's different from America is, from North America, United States, is Korea is a country that's pretty much, as best I can tell, pretty much all granite. I mean, it's a rock country. I go into the mountains of Korea. I mean, I didn't go the whole country, but I traveled from Seoul to wherever Axe is, anyway. But up in the mountains, pure rock. And daggone it, if those people in South Korea don't bore through a granite mountain, to make a bike trail. I said, there's no way I'd do that in the United States. I mean, you bore through a rock mountain for a bike trail up in the small villages. I mean, skyscrapers in towns no bigger than Souderton or Hatfield. Skyscrapers. I mean, it is an industrious, resourceful culture, no question. Tim Haas's response as I'm observing this, I was just kind of marveling. Tim Haas says, yeah, Koreans are hardworking people. Because if we don't work, we starve. So I understand that's part of the culture. But now you combine that with consumeristic capitalism, and I just will say, if you're not careful, if I'm not careful, we can work not just 40 hours a week, not just 50 hours a week. By the way, faculty contracts at Missio Seminary assume you're working a 50-hour week on average. I've said already, I typically put in 10 hours a day. Now, some of it's reading. It's not like sweat of the brow activity. But 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, that's 60 hours. Not uncommon for that to stretch up into 70, 12 hours. But I can tell you, actually, she can tell you, if that 10 hours a day, I generally take a Sabbath, but if that 10 hours a day stretches above 12 hours, 14 hours, 15 hours, so that now it's not just 50, 60, 70, but 80 hours, I might tell myself, I'm working for the Lord. I mean, I'm working for Missio Seminary. I'm working for the Lord. I might tell myself that. But that's actually, at that point, operating in violation, not in accordance with, but in violation with how my divine Creator designed me. That's not virtue. That's vice. That actually degenerates into idolatry. Now you're working to work. And the people around me who know me best and love me most are the ones who can tell first, and often are the ones who are victimized if I do that. I get grumpy. Not too grumpy, but anyway. Anyway, it has downside of it. My guess is that's not just true for me. In fact, I know because of God's Word. That's true for you too. You know, I have some parameters. I don't do email on Sunday. So if you send me an email or something on Sunday, I'm not, and I tell students this, that doesn't stop them from sending them to me, always. But if you send it to me other than Friday, Monday to Friday, I'm not going to respond until Monday anyway. And that goes with assignment anyway. But nevertheless, life can creep in. So let me say to you, and I know some of you are in industries that are competitive. Global economy is 24/7. But can I just say to you gently as we kick off this new work year, is the amount of time that you spend in work, however good the work is the amount of time indicative of your succumbing to vice and idolatry rather than living in accordance with God's divine design. God has designed us, our bodies, to take regular rest. Any doctor in the world, my guess is including this one, any doctor in the world will tell you it's best if you can get 8 hours of sleep a night. So a regular rhythm of daily rest, but then a regular rhythm of weekly rest. And I'll set aside for the moment, annual, rest, year of Jubilee stuff. But God has designed you and me with a rhythm that's meant to be adhered to and not violated. And I'll just tell you, my colleague, he's been my next door for 10 years, Chang Hoon-oh, our Director of Intercultural Ministry, and he works hard. And he talks about, often in Korean culture, people sleep in their office. He just tells me these things. As a matter of fact, one day he said to me, Koreans work hard. They work long hours, work hard. But he said they don't usually live long. Now, I don't know if that's true. He's the one who told me that. But so I just say to the Americans, to the Koreans, to the Korean Americans that I'm getting to know and care about, don't shorten your life. Out of a mistaken sense of virtue, when it actually at root may be idolatry rather than godliness. Fair enough? All right, question. Are you doing what you were designed to do? Now, this young fellow looks a little guilty. I mean this to be a serious question, really, not a guilt trip question. And if your answer, just stick with me, if your answer is no, not at the moment, you may actually have good reasons for the answer being no for a while. We'll get to that in a minute. But it's worthwhile to every once in a while, and we're doing it this Labor Day weekend, just surface that transcendent question, are you doing what you were designed to do? Now, I would love to encourage every person at Christ Life Church and all of your friends to consider going into full-time vocational ministry and thereby pursuing a Master of Divinity degree at Missio Seminary. That'd be a wonderful thing. Vested interest in that, acknowledged. But I know that's not the calling of every person. That's not even the calling of every believer. But this I do know. Every believer was designed to do something that forwards God's glory and the purposes and goals of the kingdom. Acknowledging what Martin Luther once said, reflecting on 1 Corinthians 10, that the washwoman who does her wash to the glory of God is fulfilling her design to the glory of God every bit as much as the preacher preaching a sermon. Now, I think that's exactly right. If she's doing what she's designed to do, doing whatever you do to the glory of God, then that is God's calling on your life. But vocation has as its root, voco vocare, calling, what you're called to by God. And my question this morning is your investment Monday through Friday, investment of your time, energy, effort Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday, are you fulfilling God's call on your life, whatever it is? You know, I'm reminded of the testimony of the guy who became famous being an Olympic runner from Scotland. He was a Scottish Presbyterian fellow, Eric Liddell. A movie was made about him, Chariots of Fire. That's the movie, okay? Eric Liddell. And he was a world-class Olympic runner. Devout Christian. And part of what that movie is about is he refused to run on Sundays. Took that as the Sabbath. You could debate whether he needed to take that anyway. But he stood for his Christian convictions as a runner. But he was a world-class runner. And his unbelieving friends were impressed with his records, with his times as a runner. But one of them asked him one time, Eric, you just seem so happy when you're running. I understand that you're good at running, good at what you do, but why are you so happy when you run? That I don't see much. And Eric Liddell responded, when I run, I can feel God's pleasure. When you do what you do, are you doing what God designed you to do such that you feel God's pleasure? Here's the diagnostic question I want to ask you this morning. In what you do from Monday to Saturday, maybe Monday to Friday, but Monday to Saturday, in what you do in your livelihood, is that using to the full the talents, abilities, strengths, capabilities, and passions God has given you? Now those should align. Strengths, talents, abilities, capabilities, and passions. So you might be passionate about it. I mean, if I were passionate about becoming an NBA professional basketball player, I've got a problem. You know, the rest, however passionate I may be about it, the rest of the package of my design just isn't going to fit that. So, but what you're good at, what you kind of enjoy, when people see you doing it, say, man, you're really good at that. And you also enjoy it. Now, you might still be frustrated by the thorns and thistles of your occupation. My wife, I think it actually originated from my wife's mother, has a saying, there's a reason they call it work. You know, there's always something in your work that's not as enjoyable. But, this is unpleasant. But is what you do something you can say, yeah, somewhere along the line, I found out, I just realized I'm good at this. And I enjoy it. And not only that, it brings home a paycheck. But are you doing what you were designed to do? And if you're not, then I'm going to ask you why not. And you may have a good reason for why not. Well, at the moment, I just need to do something that brings home a paycheck, because I've got to feed myself, feed my family. But this is part of an overall plan to do something else. Okay, you may have a good reason for it. But are you doing what you were designed to do, or at least do you have a plan by which you're pursuing doing what God designed you to do? Now, I'm actually going to cover just one more point this morning, and it's this one. Now, that's Proverbs 14:23. You may remember in the last few weeks I've had up Proverbs 4:23. It's in the same verse. I am still willing to hear. Does somebody have Proverbs 4:23 tucked away waiting for me to bring it up? I mean, this does have a 1 in front of it. You remember Proverbs 4:23? Springs of life. Now see, she just earned $1. So I was ready. Austin? There is. I still gave her the. Can you fill it out? I'm not going to give you more than $1, but you just earned $1. All right, I don't see any other hands. This week, Proverbs 14:23. In all labor, there is profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. Now, this is kind of a clarification and qualification of, are you doing what you were designed to do? Even if your answer is no, but my next question is going to be, but you're doing something. You're doing something profitable, right? In all labor, even if it's not what you're passionate about, even if it's not your center of focus, there's profit. Mere talk leads only to poverty. A couple more things I was going to say about that, but I'm going to lead here and then land the plane. Here's the great Apostle Paul. That actually is how I think of the great Apostle Paul. Apostle to the Gentiles. Glorious missionary. Wrote 13 of 27 books of the New Testament. If you think he wrote Hebrews, it would be 14 of 27. About half the book of Acts is devoted to recounting the ministry of Paul. So over half of the New Testament is Pauline theology. I mean, great apostle. The way he introduces himself in many of his epistles, Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ, called by God before the foundation of the world to be his representative of the Spirit to the Gentiles. I mean, grand, glorious, cosmic mission central Paul. Somewhere in the 40s AD, here's Paul. Acts 17:18 gives us the story. Acts 17, he had just come from Athens, Greece, where he was debating with some of the top intellectual philosophers of the day in Athens, Greece, the center of Greco-Roman culture. Debating intellectually in the synagogues. Now, that's not much new. I mean, that's news. But no, in Athens, Greece, at the Areopagus, promulgating Christian views and distinctives to the philosophers of the day, enough that they said, we need to hear more about this. Acts 18, he goes from Athens to Corinth. Port City, kind of Las Vegas-y. Corinth, where he meets with two Jewish people who'd just been thrown out of Jerusalem by Claudius, Aquila and Priscilla. And he started making tents. 1 Corinthians 9 and 2 Corinthians, we're told that in Acts 17 and 18. 1 Corinthians 9, 2 Corinthians 10, Paul tells us why he made tents. He didn't want finances to be an issue with these unbelieving, working-class, port city people. And so he made tents to make money so that he could do his real calling, which is promulgating the gospel of Jesus Christ to people who'd never heard, Gentiles. I got the figures just this morning. About 20% of WEC missionaries. Now this is true not just for WEC, this is a mission strategy, a missiological strategy for missions organizations generally. But with the missions organization that we probably know best, WEC missionaries, about 20%, because of suspicions or hostilities towards Christianity, most of the time, about 20% are bivocational, quote-unquote, tent maker missionaries. For some of the same reasons that Paul made tents in Acts 17:18. Perhaps you do your livelihood as a tent maker. It's not really my calling. I mean, what's Paul do? What's this great apostle, intellectually Gamaliel-trained rabbi doing sewing cloth? Well, because it earns a paycheck, so I don't have to. By rights, I could, but I don't have to if I make these tents. Get my livelihood, my paycheck from the ministry, from the people I'm ministering to. I don't want there to be a distraction from the gospel. Maybe you do your livelihood in order to facilitate your doing your ministry. Maybe you're doing what your livelihood is right now to put yourself through school, to pay for school as you pursue. That's okay. Just know that that's why you're doing what you're doing. In all labor, there's profit, including making tents. Not all that glamorous, not all that world-shaking, but in all labor, there's profit. All right. How's your work going? Really? How does the work you do Monday through Saturday serve your overall plan for your mission of your life, in consultation with God's Word and sensitivity to His Spirit and all that? See, if you never ask those kinds of questions, then you can get trapped into the cul-de-sac of doing something your whole life just for the paycheck. And then I can't preach this as professor of missional theology at Missio Seminary without asking the question this way. How does the work you do Monday through Saturday forward God's mission? How does the work you do serve God's mission for your life? In what sense is your calling representing God's calling on your life? More next week as we delve deeper into some of these questions and issues. But I'm going to stop there today. Oh, by the way, for the OCDs among you, I did skip a point this morning. If you need those blanks filled out, just see me afterward. I did skip the last point, and I knew I was going in, but I didn't tell you that till now. Let's pray. Father God, thank you for your design on our lives, for your creative design of our personalities, our skills, abilities, talents. I pray, Father, that you might use